My name is Mark Ellison. I am 42 years old, a carpenter by trade, and co-owner of a small but thriving woodworking business in Minneapolis. I was born and raised in Duluth, Minnesota, the kind of place where neighbors still wave to each other, and trust is worth more than money. That is probably why what happened on my last birthday still burns in my chest every time I think about it. I believed my wife Rachel had planned something thoughtful, maybe even romantic, to celebrate my turning 42. She had been mysterious about it for weeks, dropping hints about a weekend surprise, and telling me to pack an overnight bag. In my mind, it felt like a chance to reconnect, to shake off the months of small arguments and cold silences. I never imagined it would be the day my marriage would start to die. We set out on a bright Friday morning, the kind of day that makes you think anything is possible. Rachel was behind the wheel, smiling like she was in on the best secret in the world. Her sisters, Tracy and April, were in the back seat, chatting and giggling, occasionally glancing at me like they had some private joke. I told myself they were just excited to be part of the celebration. 3 hours into the drive, Rachel suggested we stop at a roadside diner in rural South Dakota. "You have to try their pie," she said, her voice sweet but carrying that edge I had learned to recognize over the years. I went inside, ordered coffee, and reached for my wallet, thinking about the lake or cabin we might be heading to. That was when I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel, followed by the faint echo of laughter through the glass door. I stepped outside into the warm midday sun and saw nothing but an empty parking spot where the car had been. My stomach dropped. At first I thought maybe they had moved the car, playing some light-hearted trick. Then I spotted it. On the splintered red bench near where the car had been parked was a folded note. I picked it up, my fingers already shaking, and read the words written in Rachel's neat handwriting. "See you when you have learned to handle things yourself." My pulse pounded in my ears. Handle things myself? Was this some kind of test? Some twisted joke? I looked down the road in both directions, but they were gone. The waitress from the diner poked her head out the door and asked if I was all right. I forced a half smile, told her I was fine, but inside I was anything but fine. I felt heat in my face, the mix of humiliation and anger building like a slow boil. This was not some harmless prank. This was deliberate. This was meant to embarrass me, to prove something to them, though I had no idea what. I stood there, gripping that note, feeling like a fool in the middle of nowhere. And right then, between the cracked asphalt under my boots and the sound of a distant freight train, I decided something quietly but firmly. If they thought I was going to crawl back laughing it off, they had no idea who they had just left at that diner. As I stood there in that diner parking lot, the wind carrying the faint scent of fried food and diesel from the highway, I realized this was not just about today. It was the latest and ugliest chapter in a story that had been building for years. My marriage to Rachel had not started this way. When we first met, she was warm, clever, and quick to laugh, and I thought I had found someone who would stand beside me through anything. But almost from the moment I was introduced to her sisters, Tracy and April, I knew I had been cast in a role I never auditioned for, the outsider, the easy target. They had a way of talking over me, making sly comments about my work, my truck, even the way I dressed, all disguised as teasing. At first, I let it slide. I told myself it was just their way of bonding, a family dynamic I would learn to fit into. But over the years, their jokes grew sharper, more personal, and Rachel rarely stepped in to defend me. If anything, she sometimes joined in, laughing along as though my discomfort was part of the entertainment. I remember one Thanksgiving when Tracy asked me in front of everyone if I was ever going to upgrade from hobbyist to a real business owner. April chimed in, wondering if I would finally be able to afford something better than hand-me-down tools. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside, I felt the sting. Those moments stayed with me long after the plates were cleared and the goodbyes were said. There were other signs too, Rachel canceling our weekend plans because her sisters needed her, her reluctance to spend holidays with my family, the way she would side with them in any disagreement, no matter how unreasonable they were being. It was as if my marriage came with a permanent third and fourth wheel, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never get a say in where we were going. I thought maybe things would change after we bought our house, or when business picked up, or when we got older and priorities shifted. They did not. If anything, the more I tried to be patient, the more they seemed to push. Standing in that parking lot, I could feel the weight of all those years pressing on me. This so-called birthday surprise was not just an impulsive prank. It was the logical next step for people who had never respected me and never thought they had to. It was a message wrapped in laughter. We can humiliate you, and you will take it. And for the first time in a long time, I started to wonder if maybe the real surprise would be what happened when I finally decided not to. The first thing I did was check my phone, thinking maybe Rachel had left some kind of follow-up message or clue that this was just a bad joke with an endpoint. Nothing. Just a few unread work emails and a text from Ethan about a delivery mix-up at the shop. I called Rachel twice, then once more just to be sure, straight to voicemail each time. My gut told me she was watching the calls come in and ignoring them, probably with Tracy and April snickering beside her. That was when the heat in my chest turned cold. I knew I was not getting a ride back. Not from them. The waitress inside the diner was kind enough to let me use her phone to check the bus schedule. The next Greyhound heading toward Minneapolis was hours away, and it was not a direct route. By the time I paid for the ticket, I had 13 hours of travel ahead of me. Most of it through the kind of flat, endless land where your thoughts have nowhere to hide. I bought a bottle of water and a pack of peanuts from the vending machine and sat in the corner of the station, trying not to think about how it had come to this. But of course, that is all I could think about. The bus ride was slow and noisy, with every squeak of the suspension reminding me I was moving farther from the woman I had promised to build a life with. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the crunch of tires on gravel, the sound of their laughter fading away, the mocking neatness of that note. Around hour 6, somewhere near a tiny town whose name I cannot remember, I stopped feeling angry and started feeling something heavier. Humiliation. Not the sharp kind you feel when someone makes a quick joke at your expense, but the deep kind that settles in your bones when you realize the people closest to you think so little of you. It was during that ride that the memories started coming one after another. Rachel brushing off my concerns about her sisters, telling me I was too sensitive, and those smug smiles they would share when they thought I could not see. I thought about the times I had bitten my tongue instead of speaking up, the arguments I had avoided for the sake of keeping peace. I wondered if my silence all those years had made them believe I was too weak to push back. By the time the bus finally rolled into the Minneapolis station, I had made a quiet decision. I was not going home. At least, not to the place Rachel thought of as home. I was going somewhere else, somewhere she could not reach me. And the next time she saw me, it would not be as the man she thought she could humiliate into submission. The closest bus station was 6 miles from that diner, and I walked most of it with the note still in my hand, crumpled and damp from my grip. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into a truth I had been avoiding for years. Rachel and her sisters did not just cross a line that day, they burned the bridge behind them. When I finally reached the station, the clerk told me there was 1 seat left on the late bus heading toward Minneapolis, with transfers that would stretch the trip to almost 17 hours. I bought the ticket without a word, slid into a hard plastic chair in the corner, and stared at the floor, like it might give me answers. When the bus pulled in, I climbed aboard and settled into a seat near the back. The air smelled faintly of coffee and diesel. the kind of smell that sticks to your clothes. Outside, the sun was already beginning to sink, casting long shadows over the flat South Dakota fields. I watched the light fade, my reflection staring back at me in the darkening window. With every mile, the sting of what happened shifted from shock to something heavier, disbelief tangled with humiliation. It was not just that they had left me, it was that they had laughed while doing it, like my dignity was the punchline to a joke they had been telling for years. The hours crawled. At every stop, more people got on, and I found myself staring at their faces, wondering what they would think if they knew the man across from them had just been abandoned by his wife as a lesson. I thought about Rachel's smirk when she thought she was right, about Tracy's habit of leaning in to whisper something just loud enough for me to catch half of it, about April's talent for turning any compliment into an insult. And then I thought about me. How many times I had swallowed my pride, let them take little pieces of me. Told myself it was not worth the fight. Somewhere in the middle of the night, the bus rolled past a stretch of road I recognized from a trip years ago. Back then, Rachel had fallen asleep against my shoulder, and I had thought we were building a life worth protecting. Now, staring out at the empty fields, I realized I had been the only one protecting anything. By the time the bus hissed to a stop in Minneapolis, my decision was made. I was not going back to the house Rachel and I shared. I was heading somewhere she would not expect, and from that point on, she would have to live with the fact that she had no say in what I did next. When the bus finally rolled into Minneapolis, the city lights felt colder than I remembered. I did not head to my own place. Instead, I called Ethan, my best friend and business partner, and asked if I could crash at his place for the night. He did not even hesitate, told me to come over and that Linda, his wife, was already making coffee. When I got there, Linda gave me a look that said she already knew something was wrong. She set the mug down in front of me and, without a word, slid her phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots of a group chat, Rachel, Tracy, and April. My stomach tightened before I even started reading. The conversation was dated a week before my birthday. Tracy wrote, "We should do something big this year, something he won't forget." April followed with, "How about we leave him somewhere and make him figure his way home? Call it survival training." Then Rachel, my wife, responded, "Perfect. We'll stop at that diner off Route 83. He'll never see it coming." I scrolled further, my hands tightening around the phone. There were messages from the day itself, updates about how far they had driven, jokes about whether I was begging for a ride yet, even a photo of my truck keys sitting on the dashboard with the caption, "Bye-bye, birthday boy." What made my jaw clench hardest were the hashtags. Man up Mark, lesson learned, and the one that felt like a knife twist, birthday freedom. They were not just mocking me in private, they were doing it publicly, laughing about it online like it was a game. Linda told me some of the posts were already getting attention from mutual friends, and a couple of people had even commented that it was harsh. But most of the replies were just laughing emojis from people who had no idea they were watching a marriage fall apart. I sat there in Ethan's kitchen, the hum of the fridge loud in the silence, and felt something shift inside me. This was not about a single day. This was about years of being treated like an outsider in my own marriage, of Rachel using her sisters as backup whenever she wanted to belittle me. The screenshots were proof, undeniable evidence, that what they did was not a heat-of-the-moment mistake, but a planned humiliation. I handed the phone back to Linda, thanked her for saving the messages, and told them both I was not going back to that house. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. If Rachel thought this was funny, she was about to learn that the punchline was mine to write. I woke up the next morning in Ethan's guest room, the faint smell of sawdust from his workshop drifting in through the open window. For a moment, I almost forgot where I was. Then I saw my duffel bag on the floor, the crumpled note Rachel had left me still sticking out of the side pocket, and it all came rushing back. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor, feeling the kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. I had a choice. Pretend this was just a bad night and go home, or draw a line so deep it could never be crossed again. When I went into the kitchen, Ethan was already pouring coffee. He slid a mug toward me and said, "So, what now?" I did not answer right away. I was thinking about my house, my tools, my business, and the life I had built with someone who clearly had no respect for me. I thought about how many times I had convinced myself that things would get better, that if I just ignored the small cuts, they would stop coming. But they never did. This latest stunt was not just another cut. It was the knife they expected me to leave in my own back. "I am moving out," I finally said. "I am not going back there." Ethan nodded slowly, like he had been waiting to hear those words for years. "Good," he said. "About time." Linda walked in, still in her robe, holding her phone. She told me she had saved every post, every comment, every screenshot. "You are going to need these," she said, setting the phone on the table. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes told me she was as angry as I was. That day, I drove to our house while Rachel was at work. I packed my clothes, my personal tools, and a few photo albums that still mattered to me. I did not take anything that we had bought together. I wanted no argument about what was mine and what was hers. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand, the same spot where I used to leave little notes for her when I worked late. No note this time. Just silence. I locked the door behind me, put the key in an envelope, and slid it through the mail slot. By the time I got back to Ethan's, I had already called my bank to transfer accounts, updated my address with the post office, and arranged to have my phone number changed. If Rachel wanted to talk, she would have to go through Ethan. And I knew she would not like that. The truth was, I was done talking. I had finally made a decision I should have made years ago. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight starting to lift. It only took her 8 days to find me. I was in Ethan's shop, cutting down a slab of maple for a custom dining table, when I heard the front door open and her voice call out my name like nothing had happened. I did not turn around. I kept the saw steady, letting the sound of the blade fill the air until I finished the cut. When I finally looked up, Rachel was standing there in a clean white blouse, hair perfectly done, like she was walking into a brunch reservation instead of the wreckage she had caused. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, stepping closer with that soft, practiced tone she used when she wanted something. "I think we both overreacted." My chest tightened, not from doubt, but from the sheer gall of her words. Overreacted? She had left me 300 miles from home like a stray dog and broadcasted it online, and now she wanted to frame it as a mutual misunderstanding. I set the saw down, wiped my hands on a rag, and leaned against the workbench. "What exactly do you think I overreacted to, Rachel? The part where you drove off without me? Or the part where you and your sisters laughed about it for everyone to see?" She flinched, just barely, then recovered with a small shrug. "It was supposed to be funny, a wake-up call. You take everything so seriously." I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I shook my head slowly. "If humiliating me in public was your idea of a wake-up call, you'd better be ready for what happens when I actually wake up." Her eyes narrowed then, a flash of irritation breaking through the fake concern. "So what? You're just going to throw away 10 years over one bad joke?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "That's where you're wrong," I said. "This isn't about one day. It's about every day before it. And no, I'm not throwing away 10 years. I'm finally done wasting them." I picked up the piece of maple, turned my back, and started sanding it, signaling the conversation was over. Rachel stood there for a few seconds, her heels clicking softly on the concrete, before muttering something under her breath and walking out. When the door shut, Ethan came out from the office, eyebrows raised. "You handled that better than I would have," he said. I just kept sanding, the wood grain coming to life under my hands. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady. Rachel had come expecting the man who used to bend just to keep the peace. Instead, she met the man who had finally decided peace was worth more than her approval. It started 2 days after Rachel walked out of the shop. My phone, well, Ethan's phone, since all calls to me now went through him, began lighting up with messages from my parents, my aunt in Wisconsin, even an old neighbor from Duluth. They all had the same opening line. "Rachel says you're not doing well." She had wasted no time painting a picture of me as some unhinged husband in the middle of a midlife meltdown, running away from his marriage over a misunderstood joke. According to her, I was confused, unstable, and isolating myself from the people who love me. It was the oldest trick in the book. Get to the story first, make yourself the victim, and let the truth get buried under layers of sympathy. The part that really burned was how easily she could spin the narrative, knowing that most people would never bother to ask for my side. I could almost hear her saying it in that sad, performative voice she used at parties when she wanted people to lean in and comfort her. But if Rachel thought she could control the story, she had forgotten one thing. I had proof. Not just my word against hers, but screenshots, public posts, private messages, all neatly organized thanks to Linda's quick thinking. Ethan and I sat in the shop office one evening, going through them one by one, the glow of the laptop screen making the words stand out even sharper. "We have more than enough to turn this around," Ethan said. He was right. I could have blasted everything on social media that night, embarrassed her in front of everyone the way she did me. But I wanted something cleaner, permanent. That was when I called Howard Parker, an attorney I had known since I was a teenager. He was a friend of my father's, sharp as a blade, and with no patience for nonsense. I told him everything. How Rachel had left me in another state, how she had mocked me publicly, and how she was now trying to ruin my reputation to save her own. Howard didn't just listen. He started drafting a plan before I had even finished speaking. "File first," he said. "Don't give her the chance to box you in. And keep everything. Every text, every post, every comment. We're going to need it." By the time I hung up, the decision was set in stone. Rachel wanted a version of events where she was the wronged wife, and I was the man who lost his mind. Instead, she was about to face a story backed by evidence, in front of people who mattered a lot more than her circle of sympathizers. I was done being her punchline. Now it was her turn to explain the joke. Howard wasted no time. Within 48 hours, he had filed the divorce petition and sent Rachel a formal notice. I could almost picture her reading it, the smug confidence slipping from her face. From that moment, the game was no longer played in whispers and social media posts. It was on paper, in the legal system, where words have weight and evidence matters. Howard's first move was to subpoena every digital record connected to Rachel and her sisters from the weeks leading up to my birthday. I already had the screenshots Linda saved, but Howard wanted the whole thread. Timestamps, IP logs, even deleted messages. "People forget that the internet never really deletes," he said with a grin that told me he'd done this before. While Howard's office worked on the legal side, Ethan and I kept pulling together anything we could find. Friends started sending me things I had not even seen. Snippets of conversations where Rachel bragged about how hilarious it had been to leave me stranded. Comments she made in group threads about teaching Mark some independence. And even a video Tracy had posted for a few hours before deleting it. In the clip, you could hear all three of them laughing in the car, with Tracy saying, "Bet he's pacing around that parking lot like a lost puppy right now." It was short, grainy, and devastating. Howard's assistant compiled everything into a neat, damning portfolio. She even included the public posts Rachel had made after I left. the ones where she implied I was having a breakdown. Next to those, Howard placed the screenshots of the group chat that showed they had planned the whole thing weeks in advance. "This isn't just about the divorce," Howard told me one afternoon as we reviewed the binder. "This is about credibility. Once the court sees this, every word out of her mouth will be weighed against what we know to be true." There was a strange kind of calm in me as we built the case. For years, I had felt like I was on the defensive with Rachel and her sisters, constantly reacting to whatever jab or slight they threw my way. Now, for the first time, I was the one preparing the move, and they were the ones who would have to answer for it. I did not need to shout. I did not need to humiliate them the way they had humiliated me. All I had to do was let the truth sit under the bright light of a courtroom where laughter turns to silence real quick. By the time Howard told me we were ready for the hearing, the binder was thick enough to slam on a table. And when he did, it would not just make a sound, it would make a point. The morning of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Howard at my side, that thick binder of evidence under his arm like it was a loaded weapon. Rachel was already there, sitting next to her attorney, dressed in a pale blue dress that made her look like she was auditioning for a role as the grieving spouse. She did not look at me at first, but when she finally did, she gave a small, almost pitying smile, as if she still believed I would fold once the judge heard her version. When the session began, her lawyer went first. He painted a picture of a loving wife who had tried to help her husband gain some independence, and a husband who had overreacted and abandoned the marriage rather than working through a misunderstanding. Rachel kept her head down while he spoke, nodding occasionally at just the right moments, the way you might during a eulogy. I sat there quietly, my hands folded, letting her dig her own hole. Then Howard stood. He started slow, polite, like he was just clarifying a few points. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, "you've described this as a joke that was taken out of context. Would you say that's correct?" She agreed quickly. "And you believe that posting about it online was harmless?" Again she nodded. That was when Howard reached for the binder, flipping it open to the page with the group chat dated a week before my birthday. He read Tracy's line. "We should do something big this year, something he won't forget," followed by April's suggestion and Rachel's own words planning the diner drop-off. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Rachel shifted in her seat. Her lawyer objected, claiming the messages were taken out of context. But Howard had already moved to the next page, the video clip of their laughter in the car, Tracy's voice mocking me. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening, and told Rachel to explain. Her answer was a stumbling mix of, "It was supposed to be funny and we didn't think he'd take it that way." But the air in the room had already changed. This was no longer the story of a wife's innocent prank. It was a story of planned humiliation. Howard closed with the social media posts, Rachel's public claims about my mental breakdown, placed side by side with the evidence that she had orchestrated the entire event. The judge looked directly at her when he said, "This does not read like a misunderstanding. It reads like cruelty." Moments later, the divorce was granted. My separate business assets remained mine, the house was sold, and the proceeds split evenly. But the real victory was watching the carefully built image Rachel had been holding on to collapse right there in that courtroom. She had come in expecting sympathy. She left with silence. 3 years have passed since that day in court, and I can tell you this: peace feels different when you have earned it the hard way. I still live in Minneapolis, but not in the same neighborhood, not in the same house, and definitely not with the same people. I bought a small place near the lake, nothing flashy, but it is mine from the foundation up. The mornings are quiet, except for the sound of gulls overhead and the hum of my coffee maker. Sometimes I stand on the porch and just breathe, because I can. No arguments waiting inside. No walking on eggshells. No looking over my shoulder to see who is laughing. The woodworking business Ethan and I run has never been better. We have more clients than we can handle. And last year, we started making custom pieces for a boutique hotel chain. My name is on the invoices, my hands built the work, and every dollar we make feels like a step further from the life I left behind. I even started teaching a weekend carpentry class for kids, something I never would have had the patience or energy for when my days were spent defending myself at home. Now I am building more than furniture. I am building a life worth living. As for Rachel, word gets around in a town like this. I have heard she moved in with Tracy after a short-lived engagement ended badly. April apparently had her own public fallout after making the wrong joke about the wrong person at work. I do not celebrate their troubles, but I also do not lose sleep over them. They were architects of their own walls, and now they are the ones living inside them. The truth is, my revenge was never about destroying them. It was about removing their power over me. Once I walked away, the rest took care of itself. Every now and then, someone will ask if I would ever speak to Rachel again. My answer is always the same. I wish her well, but I wish her well from a distance. You cannot build trust out of broken wood, no matter how skilled the craftsman. And I have better things to build now. The man they left at that roadside diner is gone. In his place is someone who knows his worth, who protects his peace like it is the most valuable thing he owns, because it is. And if I learned anything from all of this, it is that the best kind of revenge is not loud or bitter. It is living a life so steady, so untouchable, that the people who tried to break you have to live with the fact that they could not.